Hey, it's Noah Vortex. Now this video could go either way, but I wanted to do something a bit interesting. A bit of a thought experiment, so take quite a large pinch of salt, I'd say. But I thought it'd be quite an interesting exercise just to think about. So Britain has never had a socialist or a communist revolution or an uprising or any real indication of that, like Russia had in 1917, for example, or as China had, and any other country which had a socialist in name or in practice, or either or neither in the past. So I thought it'd be an interesting thought experiment to think, because this is the thing with left politics is leftists like to complain a lot about what's wrong, but often their actual solution for how to fix those issues is often quite underdeveloped in a lot of respects. It can seem a bit naive, idealistic. That's one of the critiques often of the left. It's like, fine, you've had a revolution, but what are you going to do on the day after? And the left, I think in general, the contemporary trend has been for the left to get increasingly less theoretical in a serious way. That might just be my own opinion. To be fair, there are still serious theorists, but a lot of it, the vast block, the monolith of the left, sort of became consumed in this identity politics and tit-for-tat oppression Olympic stuff, which I've got to admit I'm not really a fan of myself, and I just don't think it really doesn't lead anywhere. It's just circular politics, really. Now, I'm not doing this because I am a communist. I'm not really. I'm interested in socialist theory, but I'm not an active or engaged communist, really. And I'm not saying this is something that should be initiated. Like I said, it's a thought experiment, not a manifesto. So probably important to get that out of the way, considering that if I didn't say that, potentially I'm breaking the law. But no, this is just a thought experiment, basically. Bear with me a minute, just got to get this. My keyboard's just run out of battery, so let's plug it in. Right, great timing that was. Stop it for a minute. Okay, so let's set the scenario. So it's the UK setting. UK, and the year is basically just the same, 2025, but it's a different context and time. So this is the day after the revolution. The day after the revolution. Again, like I said, this is all highly theoretical. I'm not saying like this is what I want the world to be. I'm just saying, if I was in a position of leadership in this imaginary socialist vanguard or whatever, how could I actually get it to work, right? It's a good exercise just thinking about how the institutions of the UK work, but in general, how do you balance people's competing egos? This has always been the problem with communism, is like human nature or people's selfishness, right? Because communism, if you believe in that ideology, really demands quite a selfless, collectivist mindset, right? The day after the revolution. Now, obviously this is the type of thing that would actually be much better being run as an actual sim with some sort of rules, but again, just a thought experiment. The communist vanguard of Great Britain, call it that, has assumed control of Parliament in a coup. So again, same conditions as the Russian Revolution, right? Alright. So, sanctions have been put in place. Already been imposed from the US. And major figures of the main political parties have left the country. Okay, so all that's so basically a clean slate of sorts. Now again, just stressing that this is not something I actually want. I don't believe in violent uprisings. What would be the intelligent thing to do at this point? So here are some of the options, I guess. We could obviously go quite forceful, authoritarian, repressive policies to ensure stability. That would be one direction you could go down in this quite dangerous situation. So let's just write this down. Initial policy strategy or something, I don't know. So let's have a look. Strategy. Again, like I want to emphasize again, this is me role playing. It doesn't necessarily believe. It's not necessarily a belief of mine. I'm just role playing ideas. So we could go this way, which is more the, so crack down on dissent, jail sentences, or even worse. So that would be obviously the sort of almost like Stalinist way of going around dealing with that problem. There was also a lot of that during the actual Soviet Union's. And then another way we can go is like basically more cooperative and consolidate power base of left-wing interests, I guess. So you could, because obviously we've got to deal with these sanctions that have been imposed on trade, which will immediately affect the economy of the country, right? So it would be if you're representing a left-wing power base, it's going to be in your interest to consolidate, probably. What else? We could also messaging, and I guess it's like PR almost. PR. I'll write a bit more about that in a minute. PR is the wrong word for it, but you know what I mean. Almost like propaganda, more really. Propaganda. And the other alternative way you can go is to like be very truthful rather than propagandist, because propagandist tends to be a skewering of the truth, right? The other thing was like economic vision. So that you'd have to start setting some of that up and actually put it into practice. There's no point getting into government with such radical ideas unless you can actually put some of that into practice. I mean, typically that's going to include nationalisation of key industries, worker control of key industries, but again, that's not always worked out that way. Worker controls of key industries. I'll dive a little deeper into that probably. That'll be probably the bit I'll go into the most deeply, because I think this is actually the hardest bit, where every communist society has gone wrong in some way or another in the past. I don't think any communist country has ever got this right, because, well, their economies were never that efficient, really. So again, that leads to issues down the line, really. And that can lead to issues. and it also could have fetches your bottom line. You at least want it so it's a managed. Well, if you're going to set up a managed economy, you need to make sure that it's not going to lead to famines and anything like that, really. Anyway, so I've got like that initial ideas down there. I'll get some pictures on there as well, just to create a little, I don't know, whatever, like a red star or something. I'll do with it. Okay, so in the Soviet Union, Lenin's idea was, I think it was written about in State and Revolution, I believe. I've already read about once a long time ago. And I will just state for the record, I've read the Communist Manifesto, I've read Engels, read Marx. I've not read loads of Lenin, I've read tiny bits of Trotsky, some Rosa Luxemburg, all that stuff. I have a vaguely familiarity with Marxist theory, and so there is a chance I can get some of the concepts wrong or some of the ideas wrong, but this is based on my understanding of the ideas. So again, I can either go along with this dictatorship of the proletariat idea, with this revolution which was dreaming up, but I'm actually going to try and... Okay, so I need to figure this initial policy. So yeah, anyway, Lenin had this idea of dictatorship of the proletariat. The idea basically is that you have an elite that control centralized power for the benefit of the proletariat, which is the workers basically, or the people that produce wealth, the workers that produce wealth. And then these elite communists create a committee that protects the interests of, workers, establishes socialism, so worker control of the means of production, and then this committee withers away when full communism has been achieved. So the idea here, just to get a few things clear, because there's somewhat of a confusion in communism in some respects between what communism and socialism, right? So socialism. Now these are a bit contested as well, but again, bear with me. Like socialism and communism. So I'm going to talk about it like in theory, right? Because in action, they've not always been exactly as thus. But let's just discuss pure theory aspect of it. So socialism, tenets of socialism. Main one, worker control and means of production. Well, what does that mean in practice? Well, that's basically it just means that workers manage factories or businesses, worker self-management basically. So workers manage collectively, and you at least, one feature of socialism that's important is you're going to at least have a reduction in hierarchy. So reduction in hierarchies of hierarchies and wage capitalist exploitation, i.e. capitalists exploiting the products, what would be the right way to put it? Capitalists getting surplus profits from workers from products generated by labour, I guess. That was a bit cat-handedly put, but it's basically what it is. So again, it's working towards reducing the levels of exploitation in that in a business, but also on the societal level. So that would incur. Okay. Anyway, so what's the difference between these two then, really? So I think probably the easiest way, and again, communism is a bit of a. In theory, true communism would actually be stateless. I think. In the most purest theory, communism would be stateless, actually. So it's like classless society. So that is actually an aspect of it. It has never, ever worked out that way in practice, but that can be summed up best by Marx's statement, from each according to his ability. To his ability, to each according to his needs. Right, that's from Mr. K. Marx himself. That is a good summing up of how communism. I mean, basically, socialism is a developmental stage to communism, really, and even in. So if you have anarchy, is actually, in some respects, it's anarchism. Anarchism represents a stateless. Anarchists do not believe in a state whatsoever. So where socialists and anarchists would differ is socialists would consider a state, maybe necessary state transition into communism, right? Anarchists are against the state. They do not like the state, and they would anarcho-communists. Just had another figure. Would want to transition into this state eventually, right? So many long words to type. Anarcho-communists, right? They would want to transition into this. Yeah, they do basically eventually, but then other offshoots don't. There we go. They also want to probably basically transition to that if they can. But again, this represents. It's more of an ideal. It's an ideal, really. A lot of states have called themselves that, but it's never actually happened. Okay, now we've got those definitions done. So we've got all that there. Just we've got all those definitions done. Let's look at these initial. So I think if I want to create, my goal is to create communism, right? I think I want to go along a socialistic route. I don't think anarchistic. I don't think an anarchistic approach to this it would work. And I'm going to try and bear in mind the technology that we have today, socialism, right? So I'm going to use the state somewhat. Now I think I want to avoid this. I don't want that. I think, especially if you've just come in as a new regime, you're already going to have a lot of people, who aren't going to be happy with you. Now, I think this would be a bad idea. You want that on some level, but you don't want it to be too over the top. This would be a bad precedent. Also, that excessively would be too much. So the only thing I think we need to consider from the authoritarian thing is we do need to think of some policies. So policies for stability, right? That's an important thing. And we do need to consider dissent and handling dissent. How? Because that is going to be happening. That will be a factor. And I think this is probably one of the main things that the Soviet Union. I mean, the Soviet Union had a civil war. I mean, not long after it was established, which I think probably hardened a lot of the people who were maybe initially had a bit more of a democratic vision policy. So yeah, these are all good things. So basically, you want to gather. If you, again, assuming you want to do this properly, you're going to need a big power base. You're going to need all the left. All the left should be not united in like all their beliefs, but form an assembly of sorts, right? So you're going to want broad church. So there is democratic. It's not like just a top-down thing, right? So I think that would be important. Yeah, there we go. So again, you're going to be wanting consolidate and form allegiances with other left parties, I guess. Again, especially in a situation like this where you're a group that's taken over the state. Messaging and propaganda. So I have an idea here which I don't know if it actually work. But I think this can really go wrong really fast. Because if you become like if a socialist party came in charge of Great Britain and started doing like agit-prop Soviet style immediately, people would not be happy. And they'd be right to not be happy because it would be scary. It would terrify people, basically. And then a lot of the time as well with messaging and propaganda, you're relying on an outgroup, or it usually requires a enemy. So in the communist USSR's case, it was capitalism, of course, and the whites in during the Civil War. So I think probably for messaging and propaganda, right, you're probably going to want to. That's going to be tied in with the economic vision. So there will be some propaganda from that, but then it would be more about spelling out what would be the benefit. What would be the benefit of policies? How will they work, etc., etc. So again, education. I think educate and economic vision would be an important one to platform. Would be important to platform immediately. So yeah. And I'm going to try and think of a timescale for this as well. So economic vision. This is more. I'm going to try and go a bit in depth into this because it is basically all of every Marxist theory is based on the assumption of materialism, right? So it's material forces create the conditions for the world, right? So that's Marxist theory is based on that, and the entire premise is that if resources were equally distributed, then society would function better and there would be less exploitation of labour by the capitalist and but they call it, well, Marx calls it bourgeois, petty bourgeois class. So again, that's Marxist theory. That's just what it is. So the basic idea is that you have the proletariat. Okay. So the proletariat is the worker class. Okay. I hate spelling that word. I just have to get my misspelling it. Proletariat. Come on, spell check. Come on for me. Profiterole. Proletariat. Things like that. Yay. Okay. So the proletariat creates wealth. That's what a proletariat does in a factory, right? A group of them anyway, so it's not just one, but a group of these people, they create products. They create products, basically, which then get sold. Oh, I should probably put products, more like they create products which are sold. They produce the wealth, basically. So therefore they produce wealth. So yeah, in reality they actually do produce, which then produces that. What that makes is wealth. So that those products are sold. Products are sold and create wealth. But now here's the rub. There is a class called the bourgeois, the petty bourgeois. In modern terms, that would probably be something like the middle classes or the sort of admin. I don't know. It varies depending on the structure of society. So yeah, they sell their products, right? So yeah, they've got 3 boxes which have been produced by, I don't know, how many guys are there? Let's go like this. There's one of them. 3 workers. Actually, let's call it 6. 6 of the proletariat have created these products. Okay, so these 6 guys, they spent 2 days working very hard to make these 3 boxes. Now, we have our petty bourgeois and bourgeois, so let's just find a boss of some sort, I don't know. I don't know, this guy, or I don't know. Maybe that's the petty bourgeois. That's the petty bourgeois. Basically, the petty bourgeois would be more enforcing rules on the workers, I guess. I think that's more or less accurate. And your boss would be like, I don't know, Patrick Bateman type guy. So a bit of a... So yeah, So these guys have spent, they've given their time, they've given their work, their expertise, technical expertise. That is what they have given those products. Okay? They've done that. They've put in... Oh, God damn it. Jesus Christ. Not that. I don't want to do that. No. Why? No. Let's just write that again. I did that. Work. Technical expertise. Smaller. Not that small. Ugh. There you go. Tease, and they've given their time. So probably again like work. They've done the actual physical work, physical and mental, to make the boxes. They've given that to the, and you get like, I don't know, 2 days for argument's sake. So they've made. And then whatever technical expertise they had to get. That's what these people have given. Now, these guys are basically managing the business functions. Now, they're managing, I don't know, like more the business side of things potentially. But there's nothing, not that there's anything stopping any one of these guys doing that and getting paid the same amount. Because this is where the conflict arises. Where does the conflict arise then? Conflict? Where does it arise? Where does this conflict arise from? Well, basically, this guy, Mr. Capitalist, Mr. Bourgeois Capitalist, he is extracting... He extracts... Mr. Capitalist. Here he is. He's the big boss man of the company that makes boxes. And what he does, let's do this with a pie analogy. It's probably the easiest, right? So this is the pie. So they basically sell 3 of these, and they make what, like, for argument's sake, no, maybe I could do 600. 600 pounds is produced from that wealth. Now, we've got 6 workers there. So if they split the profits equally, so if they're worker-owned and managed factory, with if you were going to split those profits between the 6 workers that created them, it's pretty obvious what you're going to get, right? Every single worker, each of these guys is going to get 100 quid. They're each going to get 100 pounds. Each one of them gets 100 quid. Every single one of them. 100 quid to each one. Because it's split, obviously, in 6 people made it, so therefore it's split in 6. So this is how it's split, basically, like that. So, no, and split there, and there. Blah, 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 blah. What am I doing? 4 pieces. Yeah, split in 6 is. One, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, but yeah, 1600. Oh, 600 divided by 6 is 100. Right? Okay, just maths. That is basically. So, in this theoretical communism, right, where it's a worker-owned factory, every worker would receive £100 for their work. Everyone's equal. Yeah. Now, that's not what occurs usually in a capitalist or even mixed systems of commerce, right? What usually happens is something like this. So the worker will get paid. They'll usually get paid. Usually they get paid a monthly salary. It can vary. Obviously, it depends on the nature of the contract that they have out. This is where it isn't really simple, to be honest. And I'm probably butchering the explanation a bit, but essentially, Marx's whole entire argument is that these guys extract more value from this labor, this exchange of their labor power to create this product, and these guys basically, a bit like a virus or a leech, they basically extract more value from these guys, even though these guys here who are creating the actual product, the business couldn't even function without them because there would be no business, right? So, for argument's sake, in this business, the value of this guy's labor is now half of what it should be, really. So therefore, all of these guys will get not the equivalent of 100, but they'd get £50, right, for their work, meaning that they've therefore lost 50% of their actual work's value. Now, where it gets complicated is how do you actually the actual cost of the product, the value of the product is probably dictated by markets. There's no real objective way to measure it, I suppose. But leaving that aside for a second, that's a loss of 50% of the actual value of the labour. And again, this is very rough labour value. They've lost 50% of their labour's actual value. And what's happening is half of it goes to this guy. A quarter of it, sorry. Actually, probably more than that. It'll be more like... It'll actually probably be more skewed so that it's like this. And again, this is... Like, don't take this too seriously. I'm just like... Obviously, I'm trying to illustrate a principle with a really bad series of diagrams. But it's more like... this, I think. More like... Probably more like... no. How do I go for this? Just need the straight line. Yeah, more like something like that, probably. I guess. No, that doesn't work. I just have to work this out. Oh, yeah. Well, just imagine that it's not. That doesn't represent for one worker. You'd have that divided into 6, right? So, that should be worse. That would be. No, it'd be 300, and then it would be divided by 6. Yeah, it should be the same. Yeah. So, sorry, I'm just doing my maths. I'm to work it out. So yeah, imagine that just divided into 6, I guess. But this would actually be divided into 6. Alright. So that would be 300 actually. 300 divided by 6. So they get that. Which I think is 50. Let me just work it out. Double check. Oh man. My maths now. Divided by 6. Oh, not that. 300 divided by 6. Yeah, 50. Yeah. So again, you get 50. So you've got a 50% labour value loss. And then probably the most, yeah, there. So you get like that. So a quarter of 300. Oh, a quarter of 600, which is 200 something. It was over a quarter actually. It's more like 35% of it. Yeah, so if I do get my calculator out again now. Oh, not that. Calculator, and you go 600 divided by 100. So yeah, times 25, 150. Yeah, 150. That sounds about right. Roughly that type of figure for that guy's cut. And then if you add in the total minus 450, leaves 150. That'd probably be more like actually like this really, 170, 130. Okay, there we go. So yeah, you've got an imbalance there. They get 50 each. So you guys on the factory floor, your proletariat, make the product. The business doesn't exist without this guy here. So yeah, again, the argument is, well, what are these guys actually doing? These guys can manage themselves, right? So why do they get this? Why do they extract all this value? That's the question, I guess. The labour theory of value, basically. By exploiting the workers who create the value in the market, right? And that in a really badly explained nutshell. Sorry, it's a bit hard to explain it quite in a really engaging way. It probably is a bit bad, but that is basically, yeah, workers. There's a labour. The value is created from the labourer's work. These dudes extract the value from that work, and basically, yeah, just leech off it. Anyway, that's the labour theory of value. That's labour theory of value. I think that's a good way of explaining it. Of value and how capitalist exploitation functions in a business. Okay, there we go. That's fine. There we go. So yeah, basically they just labour is exploited. Okay. So that's that bit. That's quite a big part of Marx's theory. I'm just going to put it over here. There's just too much stuff. It's good to explain all that, but obviously it's quite a lot to take in, but there you go. There we go. Oh. There we go. Nope. That's the theory anyway, so that's a big part of the theory, you know. We'll put that there, make it a bit bigger. Not that big though. That's that part covered. Right, we've done that. So that is the... We have to create a society in this thought experiment. Let's just get into it a bit faster now, because I lagged a bit then. So we want to get to utopia, right? That's what's the end goal? It's this utopian communist society, right? Like, something very good. I don't know, like an amazing, almost automated, full automated luxury gay communism, whatever. Like that. That's where we want to be. So let's try and figure that bit out. Now, how do we get there? Now I'm gonna just try and make this a bit faster now, because I think I spent a bit too long on that. So this is our fully automated luxury gay communism. That's the end of it. Fully automated luxury gay communism. That's the end point. That's where we want to get to, right? How do we get there? Fully automated luxury communism. This is where we want to go. So, yeah, we've taken over. The left finally have control. How do they get to this point? So let's look at this from a few different angles, I guess. So you want to go, and again, I don't know if this would actually work. I'm just literally brain farting a bunch of theory down, seeing if any of it makes sense. No, go away. Fully automated luxury communism. That's fine. Right, so I want to get some shapes up here. Let's go. So a lot of socialist states have usually tried to have a fully centralized planned economy, fully centralized command economies, right? But they've often failed for various reasons. So I don't think this would be the route to go down. This failed so many times. I think this would need a bit of an update, to be honest, to actually achieve that, fully automated. Now, there would be a degree of automating the economy, because that's what would be required by this paradigm, right? But this is a dead end. So that's a dead end. So what else could we consider then? So I think if you want to like maximize the democratic participation of workers, so having explained this part here, I've explained where the exploitation is happening. Now, obviously in previous revolutionary socialist societies, they have been incredibly oppressive towards bourgeois and petty bourgeois people. But I've said I do not want to be using repressive, shooting people, putting them into gulags. It's horrible. That doesn't help anybody, right? So I wouldn't be for that, because most of the time these are just people who are either born into it. I don't hate the rich. I'm not one of those people who's eat the rich. There are some terrible rich people, don't get me wrong, and some real sociopathic bastards also that exist, but it's a bit reductive just to say everyone who's rich or conservative is just a monster. Anyway, I won't go off on that too much. So what I think is maybe if you could probably try and develop some sort of hybrid. Just think about this really. It's obviously a lot to think about. So, God, what? There we go. So, if you want to get to this part, we need to let's list the features. That would make sense. So, what would be the features of fully automated luxury communist society? So, obviously, you're going to have to keep the aspect of public ownership of energy. transport, all the key infrastructure. Kids put key infrastructure. Infrastructure. Yep, that's definitely got to be a feature of it. But what about luxury goods? You know, that's also important to people. Luxury goods? How do we factor those in? Because a lot of previous command economies got that very wrong. They could never predict how many, you know, because it was centrally planned. They could never predict how much demand there might be for a certain project. So so you'd always end up with an excess of products that would, you know, maybe sometimes would even go off. Obviously, you want your essentials, like distribution of essentials like food, housing, pretty important as well. Okay, I've got technology too to consider there. Technology. Which, in this age, would actually be quite key. And in fact, if you really wanted to get to this sort of, what some people theorize might be the only real way, you can do it through technology, really. So, I'm just going to, like, freestyle some ideas down, and I think... So the automated part will obviously have to include technology. This has to be based on technology, right? So a technology that we have in this current time. The obvious one there is going to be AI, so that's going to be the obvious one. But you've also got database, feedback systems, cybernetics, etc. So there have been, like, actually interestingly previous attempts to create a sort of cyber-socialism type model. So I think that's, which could have actually, in some respects, were quite successful until they were destroyed by external forces, basically. Which might, again, happen in this theoretical scenario, but just the... Okay, so right, you have some sort of automated economic system. So you could, though it does have a potential to be quite a bit too surveillance technologist, I guess, if that's even a word, technologist. But what you could do is you could have networked supply and demand monitoring. And then these, so you'd have a certain degree of, this would be the central state, right? This is the central state. So, central state. So you would have, again, a single point of entry for... Now, this doesn't probably... obviously imply like a degree of bureaucracy, but I don't think you can actually do socialism really without a degree of bureaucracy. Again, like that's where I think really theoretically this is flawed, because you may eventually get to that point, but you're always going to have some degree of bureaucracy. The danger point as well, of course, is also the fact that bureaucracy can could quickly slip into authoritarian. But again, this is theory. I'm not like saying this is like going to work. I'm just thinking. Anyway. So we have like a central state cyber socialism, some sort of advanced computer, right? That keeps it's manned by bureaucrats, so technocrats essentially. Technocrats manage this. Okay, well, what about other parts of the economy? Because you're not going to employ everyone. Just this is like basically the feedback and monitoring of how things are doing, essentially. And you'd have this one as the central. This would be the central part of it, and all the data would come in from, say, a standard business, right, or like an industry. You'd have an industry, I don't know, say for arguments, retail. Now, these would have been transformed into worker-owned. So, worker-owned co-ops, for example. And these guys just basically feed these guys with all their everything is sold. Basically, So decision making for rights decisions is now worker led on councils. So you wouldn't you're getting rid of management again, or the idea of being micromanaged. That concept disappears. It's now people who want to elect to manage the business do that. I'm choosing retail because it's not really discussed that much in the socialistic context. So I don't know, maybe you'd have also the rail or something. I don't know. Same thing really. And they would also feed back, so they'd be feeding back statistics constantly, feeding back stats. Now, the idea, which would be related to the old command economies, but it would just be updated because it's using technology, is this system in real time would balance supply and demand, right? That's the basic concept here. So go away. What does it select anything like that? So supply and demand of state resources would be based on maybe tri-monthly data from industries, right? So again, you've got a feedback loop there of sorts. Okay. So that, again, going back to what we'd initially have to do, you could stimulate growth in the economy immediately with the building of the cyber socialism economics computer or system, or I don't know. Now again, this is all like very airy-fairy, and I understand that it's but it's theory, you know. I'm not like saying this is definitely going to work. It's just a few ideas. So you can stimulate that. Yeah, you can stimulate building a cyber socialist economic system, computer system, really, I should say that. Central system. So there you have the advantage there. So what the advantage here is, you haven't just got like, in the old command economies, there was like a degree of like, obviously they were, oh God's sake, they were working with data that was being flowing back and forth, but it was nowhere near as sophisticated, right? You'd have they'd often have, from what I understand, just like passed down. They'd just be, you know, command, and then you just all the industries would just begin set targets. Whereas in this model, I'm thinking these guys would set their own targets based on what they think local demand is, or their market demand, I should say. Doesn't always mean. And then the redistribution only occurs when a business is struggling. So in theory, again, whether it'll actually work, I don't know, but the way I envision it is that like the computer will make a amendment, again going back to, because we want to build communism. That's the whole point of this thought exercise. From each according to its abilities to each according to its needs, right? That is basically that's the process that's going on in this computerized system here, right? From each, that's the whole underpinning of the actual. That's the theory that's underpinning it, right? The Marxist theory, anyway, is that you're gonna have. That's the underpinning theory of it. Okay. So, that would take, I would assume, to actually get a system like that properly taken, set up, you're looking at 5 years of development. So, funnily enough, actually, I can see what I'm doing here. I've already created my first 5-year plan. So that's the 5-year plan of economic development. It's going to be that's the first 5-year plan. Setting up, and that's first off the CyberSocialism 5-year plan. I don't know, 5-year plan. So Stalinist, but okay. It's what I've ended up planning out for some reason. 5-year plan. So this will invariably be a period, though. This will be a period of instability. This will be unstable. And the real big question that would, because there would be a lot of, I don't think there's any avoiding that really, though, to be honest. Like, if you're setting up you're basically ripping up the way everything works and starting it from scratch again. So how could you avoid that? Anyway, let's assume that this plan works. What would be the next stage of development before we get to that? So that's put this here. So it'll be unstable but necessary, I think. And like, you just hope that everybody makes it through to the side. Again, this is the problem with socialism in a lot of respects, or communism, is you're basically social engineering, and a lot of people can get hurt during that process. That's the reality of it, to be honest. And once more, I'm not advocating for any of this. I'm just saying, in theory, this is how you could go around potentially doing it, right? So there's also a lot of questions here, like the. I think food would be fine. Obviously, that's going to be a priority. And should you prioritize other sectors over others? That's a good question. But anyway, just as a... And I think during this time, you're going to want as many people on board. Dissent, I've already sort of dealt with. Messaging, blah, blah, blah. So again, it's the importance of economics. So, assume we've done this 5 years of development. What next? Because it's not going to take 5 years to get here straight away. So, if you actually want to implement truly communistic ideas in the most purest sense of the word, we need to work towards being stateless. So that vanguard, there will have been a vanguard party set up here. With vanguard party. Because you do initially need bureaucrats to basically set that up. There's probably no avoiding that. Like you're going to need people overseeing all that. And again, this is one of the problems that communism always runs into is, well, what if those bureaucrats get a bit too happy in their seats, you know? But let's assume complete and let's assume that works somewhat, and we get at least semi-automated economy. Okay, bureaucrats. So we need to think of a way that we can reduce the risk, and state should start now to be removed or dissolve. Okay, so you could write into that the actual 5-year plan that after the stage of development is complete, if that is going to be demoified, if at least 5 years economy. So you would, I think it would make sense to have bureaucrats can oversee their trade areas and the system, central health system, for 2 additional years. So there are going to be teething issues to resolve issues. And again, none of this is going to go completely right. It's just or theory, with 2 additional years to resolve issues, and then must step down, and then legally must down unless there is a requirement to continue working on something to develop the automated economy. The other thing here is I think probably we need a goal to work towards. There's been 5 hard years for people of working to create this system. Society needs a goal. Needs a goal. Whether it be space travel, luxury goods. People need to feel that they're working, building towards something more pleasure, right? I don't know, more pleasure, collective vision, something like that. Because if, again, probably you'd have it almost like, say it'd be like the age of winding down a bit, actually. Now again, this is very naive, everything I'm saying here, because like I have no idea what's going on. How could I? It's a made up situation, but on the outside of this could be great resistance to it, it could not be working at all. And you know, you could have like there you go. So we're on this stage anyway now. So that's stage 2. Okay, right, I was just thinking. My brain hurts now. That would be a good start anyway. I mean, I'll leave it for there. I'm getting a bit tired now thinking about how to create the perfect utopia that could probably never exist. But I'll leave it at that. I'll probably create part 2 and get to the fully automated luxury communism in theory. This would be probably a... I mean, if you actually had a communist society that managed to get to this stage and actually develop that technology without getting completely screwed, it would be a good place to start from. But whether it would actually work is not guaranteed. But getting to that stage would be the next, probably be a 10 or 15 year project. I'll explore more of that in part 2. I'll do a part 2. It'd be quite fun, I think. I've sort of enjoyed that. I've been on Vortex. Yeah, I'll do a part 2, so watch out for that, I suppose.